board meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Member Clerk, would you please take attendance?
Member Corcoran.
Here.
Member Corcoran is here. Member Ketto.
Here.
Member Ketto is here. Member Olson. Here. Member Olson is here. Member Rayfield.
Here.
Member Rayfield is here. Member Tyson.
Here.
Member Tyson is here. Member Peterson.
Here.
Member Peterson is here. Member Luthner is here. All present.
Thank you, Member Clerk. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda with one change, moving 7.5 to 8.0.1, the donations. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We can move on to scheduled and unscheduled visitors. Member Kelly?
There were no visitors today, so nothing to report.
Thank you. Student achievement, Forest Lake Area Middle School report. Dr. Massey.
Thank you very much. Tonight, we're fortunate to have Principal J.P. Jacobson on screen, and he'll jump on. There he is, and I'm sure J.P. will share his screen and walk us through some exciting developments with respect to course of study and pathways of study at the middle school. J.P., you want to take it away?
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and see if I can grab the screen here for a minute and share some slides. So I think I heard some feedback there. So are you able to see my first slide?
J.P., you look good.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So thanks for letting me join you tonight, albeit virtually. Just to give you an update on some of the work that we're doing as a district as it relates to our strategic plan, specifically to regards to the middle school program. If you can think back to a little over a year ago, before we were talking about social distancing and mask wearing, we were all together in the high school media center putting together the next steps for our district in the form of a strategic plan. We had parents and we had students, we had board members, educators, community, business owners, all together writing some goals for our district on a go-forward basis. And some of those I'm going to talk to tonight as we share a report out on what we're doing as a school district and how we're moving the dial in that regard. I'm not bringing anything new to the school board here in terms of our strategic plan, but I did still just include this slide for those people who are watching at home. We have a focus here area as a school district focusing on excellence in career and college and future preparedness. And we know that one of the most important things that we have to do as a district, one of our biggest tasks is to prepare kids for their next step as students, whatever that might be, and to prepare them for their future world, career and life all around. And we've got a goal area focused on that with 2 action steps. And these 2 action steps really give us some guidance and some direction as a middle school program. The first being is to find a way to have our middle school students in Forest Lake have gateway experiences in each of the career pathways during their middle level year. Right now, we have a fantastic middle school program. Kids really do enjoy their teachers and the things that they do. And one of the things that they have great enjoyment over is through choice. And the way that we approach choice in a lot of ways right now is kids choosing what courses they're going to take, and in some cases, choosing what courses that they'll never take. And just as we wouldn't approach the learning of math or reading in that way, we are so bought into our responsibilities as a school district to prepare kids for college and career readiness, and our high school's career pathway that we feel like We want our students to get a sense of everything that's on their plate, so to speak, when it comes to academics and career options in front of them. And so we're going to shift choice as a middle school from maybe which courses that they're going to take, but how they demonstrate learning within those courses, or the projects that they do in those courses, or who they work with in teams. That's where we're going to focus our choice on going forward. And what we're going to do is create greater synergy between our 7th and 8th grade middle level program and that of our high school, so that when kids leave our middle school program, they have a much richer, deeper experience in careers and career pathways, so that they can begin to make informed choices earlier on in their middle level year. The research behind this is really deep. Our World's Best Workforce Plan gives us direction on this, as does our strategic plan. The other things that we're going to try to accomplish are twofold. One is to have kids begin to explore careers in each of those career pathways, and not waiting until their 10th and 11th grade years to do so, but getting them to cast a wider net of curiosity in those careers in the 7th and 8th grade. And what I mean here is, we're having kids choose a pathway or choose a career, but begin to see what those options might be 10 to 20 years down the road for them, even as they're going through the middle years. The other thing that we want to do is we want to have kids see greater relevance in their learning through project-based learning, or through case studies at the middle school in all of their courses. The career pathway experiences for sure included in that, so that they can see how it is what they're learning could be applied today in a real world or career setting, or in the future. Trying to get ahead of that age-old question, why do I need to learn this? We want kids to just see relevance in their learning right from the start, when they're in 7th and 8th grade, as we lead into the middle school years. We've got, we're not going to start from scratch as a middle school. Our high school has already adopted a really good career pathway guide. Right now, students use information such as conversations that they might have at home with their family, careers that they might be aware of in some sort of means, whether be through media or acquaintances that they have, or through interest surveys. But our kids don't currently sample a course or get a sense of careers in each of these pathway areas. What we're talking about is now having kids do that in the 7th and 8th grade year, and us creating our gateway experiences around this wheel that you see right here. The wheel already used at the high school. We've got a design team of, not a small design team, as you can see, of educators working on this project right now. They've met 3 times for nearly a total of 8 hours. You'll see we've got teachers there from both buildings, the middle school and the high school, also all department areas. We've got the teaching and learning team on this, high school administration. All of these people working together on designing what this is going to look like. Here are some of the things that they have worked on so far. We started in our first meeting grounding our work within the strategic plan and developing a series of operating principles around how we were going to have these conversation norms, and so to speak. Things, really powerful ones, such as we're going to make decisions in what's the best interest of kids. We're going to understand our past, but we acknowledge that we are not making a return to the past, so to speak, but what we're doing is we're building our future. And we're developing a series of statements by which those are the rules by which we're gonna do this work. And then we developed a draft of a learning statement. And this is not a small step, because our learning statement speaks to the way that we believe kids need to interact with their world, even beyond school. And some of the things that they have talked about in their learning statement include finding ways to really honor and respect who we are as individuals, and helping other students to do the same. Finding ways that within our classes, kids don't learn as individuals, they learn and attack problems within teams and build solutions in teams. That's what industry is constantly for years been asking of schools. Teamwork is a big part of what they need out of their employees. We want our students to ask really good questions and think critically about other people's questions or others' questions. We want them to connect learning to new and unique situations and innovate. And we want to see students who can persevere, that see things that are hard are fun, and struggle is productive struggle is an important part of life. From there, we developed a learning statement, and then we did a deep dive on our career pathway wheel. There's a lot of people on that team that really needed to lean into that career pathway wheel and become really familiar on it. And then we spent a lot of time having conversations around what are the future of careers on a go-forward basis. What are some careers that are going to be expanding pretty rapidly in the next 10 to 15 years? And what are some careers that are waning due to advancements in technology and those careers being automated? That team has built a draft of a guiding change framework, which is essentially a picture of where we are currently, and based on the work and the conversations that we're having, where we need to go as a district, and then identifying some creative means in the middle on how we can go about doing that. Since I last spoke to a couple of our board committees, we have met with a couple of stakeholder groups. All of this work came out of some original conversations that involved parents and community members, but we sat down with a focus group of juniors and seniors a little over a week ago and outlined much of the same work and the same process to them. And we said, think back to your 7th and 8th grade years. Based on what we're describing, give us some feedback. What would be some takeaways that resonate with you or that you would have me bring back to the design team? Actually, earlier today, I met with our Career and Technical Education Advisory Council and had a very similar conversation. And we're given some valuable feedback from them. And at the end, if the board is curious, I could summarize what some of that feedback has been. And then ultimately, I'd say heading into our next meeting, our groups are going to start to create some narratives around what that would look like if we put this into practice. And we've got 5 groups within that design team that will each create different pictures of what that might be. The way that we're sequencing this work at the middle school is we're going to take that learning statement once fully completed, and we're going to use that coupled with the course of study. Here's how we are going to use our time with kids in 7th and 8th grade to give them those entry level, what kids call them during our focus group, exploratory experiences and all the different career pathway options. And those coupled together, if approved by the board, what we would see is over the summer, we would probably have some course development or refinement that would need to take place. And so we will pull together small teams of teachers who will then begin to create new courses with new names, a scope and sequence to go with those courses, and a sense of how can we create some breadth within a pathway to help see what options would be for them in that pathway. Ultimately, what we know is that in the future, when this goes into implementation, not this fall, but the fall of 2022, that over the next few years, we're going to send to the high school students that carry with them a deeper and richer experience around careers and career options, around the sort of learning model that I described with projects and real life scenarios. And what we're going to see in our belief is that our high school is going to need to respond to that in some way. What might be right now entry-level courses at the high school in certain departments might be next step level courses, because kids will have taken a course, a sampling course or an audit course on that in that area when in 7th and 8th grade. And I think it's really going to help or encourage our high school program to continue to grow as well. The way that we've kind of framed this from a long-term standpoint is like this. Right now, the clay that we are working with is in that bottom right circle. That's where we're redesigning our middle level program to do the things that I described. Once we send our students on to the high school, our high school program, like I made mention a moment ago, is going to see a different profile, right, I suppose, of student coming into their system. And then over the years, what we believe will happen is through our advisory technical education, connections with parents, conversations there, emerging career and industry fields, both locally and globally. And what we're hearing from our kids as they're graduating and leaving our system is that we're going to need to evolve, even continue to evolve at the high school and middle school level in a constant state of reevaluation and growth. I wouldn't say that we're going to be starting from scratch each year, but we should every year be looking at our overall program and saying, are there gap areas here that we can see or that we're hearing about, and what can we do to fill that in so that we've got a comprehensive program for kids? What we want our students to be able to do ultimately is, as they move into their juniors and senior years, they have had a much longer experience in making a choice around career or college after high school, and that if college is the option for them, and we want that to be option to be available to every graduate, that they have a deeper understanding of this is the career pathway that I want to go to in college, and I'm going to maybe select a college around that particular career field, maybe over which might be the best college to play tennis at, or which college my older sibling went to, or where my friends are. They're making college choices for the right reasons, and then being able to see that college degree through all the way through all 4 years. Or students are gaining certifications even with us when they're with us in grades 7 through 12. So with that work is underway. Like I said, we've met 3 times already. We have a 4th meeting coming up right after we come back from the break. The next steps as a group is to create those narratives, describe what this would look like from a time standpoint, and then what's going to happen is a group of us, myself, our current Director of Teaching and Learning, Diane Georgie, Dr. Massey, and Jim Caldwell, and some of our teaching and learning team will take that feedback from teachers and mold that into a course of study that we'll ultimately, hopefully, bring before the board here yet this spring. I have to say, that group of individuals, the names that I showed earlier, that is really an engaged group of people. The conversations have been really uplifting, founded by research, very creative. Everybody in that group acknowledges that what we currently have is good, but what we can create potentially can be even way better and way more connected with what our high school program is asking for us. So that was a lot. I'm gonna open it up to questions if anybody has any about the program, some feedback that we've got so far.
Speaking of feedback, Member Rayfield?
Yeah. Hang on. I'm in space. Okay. The question I would have is.
Can't hear you, hold on, there you
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Perfect, great. So the question I would have is that out of this process, do you see a lot of the classes themselves changing? Or is it more of a kind of a way you describe the classes to the students? When you finally get to where things are starting to change according to what you guys have come up with, where is that the biggest impact going to be, do you think?
That's a great question, Director Raphael. I would say that we're going to see some course development for sure, primarily what we had considered in our elective areas. I could see elective areas taking some of the courses that they're currently offering in bits and pieces from different courses, and then using that, but new learning and new units to build a new course. So for example, in our business department right now, at 7th and 8th grade, we offer 6 different courses. And that's probably far more courses than what we'll offer after this process is done. And we'll have parts of some of those courses combined together to create a wide experience across coding, around business principles, around networking and computer technology, those sorts of things. And I would say that the majority of this work will happen with our electives. What the design team has also talked about is opportunities within our traditional core classes to support this work. So we could see units around careers and math in science and technology. Those things are happening currently for sure. What we're going to say is that they're going to be part of our regular PLC conversations and how those can consistently and more frequently happen across all of our courses. But to answer your question, yes, I can see some fairly significant course revisions, certainly in elective areas.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that because I think one of the words we generally use to describe ourselves is relevant, right? And I think this whole effort really deals with that issue of relevance, giving the students something that makes sense for them and makes sense for where they're going to be in the world. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Member Luthner?
Thank you. And I got a preview of this because I was in the committee. Question though for the group is, are they going to be in smaller class units? So you go to more tastes of different classes? So you'd have maybe 3 or 4 half classes in a semester instead of just 2? Is that on the table, like micro classes, or is it going to be more, you still get 1 class for the semester, but it will take a longer journey over many topics?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say what's going to remain untouched in that regard, Member Luthner, is our core classes will, math, science, social studies, English, so on and so forth, will likely stay quite the same. Our elective areas, that is still to be determined what that looks like in terms of how long a course might be. Certainly could be a semester in length, or it could be every other day on a longer scale. What we need to do is we've got each of those career pathway areas that we want to fit into the middle school students' career, and we've got to know that we need to move some pieces around. What I would say is when I come back to you next to present on this work, that will probably be in greater focus at that point.
Thank you. Member Kettle?
JP, thanks for the great presentation. I was also in the strategic planning committee on some of this, and so it's great to see the potential end result to this work that we started. I'm going to take this a different direction just for a second, and that's the end result of all of this. You mentioned briefly that you're looking at some of the future careers that are going to be happening. I mean, since this really is leading to an ultimate career for a student, how did you determine those careers for the future? What were you using as resources to do that?
Yeah, so we were using a couple of different sources there. We were using some statistics from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics that have come out within the last couple of months on what are the future of careers, and they use a number of metrics to measure what that is. DEED is an organization that we use here in Minnesota that measures what sort of careers might be expanded. And those two data sets overlap quite a bit. What you're going to see in both data sets is you see a lot of careers in healthcare, in people management, in energy. You see a lot of careers in carpentry and construction. What you see waning are lower level tasks, or tasks that can be automated by machines. And a lot of those careers are careers that we want to make sure that our kids see that those are career fields that are waning a bit. And though you might have family members that are really successful in those careers, you might want to cast your eyes on something different because of where the world is going to be taking us in the next 10 to 20 years. When you think back at the careers that were not even in existence when we all first carried around our first iPhone, and that was about 15 years ago. And we're talking about kindergartners that are going to be graduating and entering the workforce in about that same time period going forth, or just short of that. We know that we've got to prepare our kids for a future that maybe looks quite a bit different today. That is why it's so critically important that we don't also forget that tangent to all of this, not just the career pathways, is that learning statement that we've talked about. You've heard me talk about in committees and here. That's going to be really critically important that we shift the dynamic on what we're asking kids to do as they learn material. I would say when we presented to the Career and Technical Education Advisory Board, that was the portion of this that they were most excited about.
Thank you.
Member Tyson?
Thank you, JP, and thank you to that long list of dedicated people that got involved to do this work. This is just excellent. I've heard it before too, and hearing it again just brings more clarity. To me, it just makes so much sense to integrate more with the high school courses because we've added so much. I mean, we have plant science classes, we have the EMS, we just have so much more now than we've had under the model that you're still on. So without adding more time, how do you see that they're going to be able to fit in more courses where they actually get that hands-on and that taste?
So I would say, yeah, we're certainly not going to be able to add more days to the school year.
Right.
I don't know that I would have gotten a lot of a positive impact or response back from students when
I'm just thinking when my daughters were there just wasn't enough time in the day for the stuff that they wanted to take.
So there's certainly going to be a repositioning of kids' time as we take a look at the courses that they're going to take. It's certainly going to be a more guided experience at the 7th and 8th grade level for sure. And so a student who may have in the past taken 3 business courses will have perhaps 1 business course at the middle level. And a student that took 3 industrial tech courses in the past might have 1. They might actually have less of an elective than they've had in the past, but still get a chance to have an experience in that. What we hope to accomplish by this is that when students move on to the high school, that they bounce between pathway areas less than they've had in the past. It's not that we wouldn't allow that going forward, but we want kids to have we want to start that experience of which one is the best fit for them earlier than what we've done before. Did I answer your question, Member Tyson?
You certainly did. I just know that you have this already in your thoughts, but just communicating all of this transition to parents, I think that, you get into the middle school and the parents are kind of trying to feel their way too. So it's going to be really important to have that information so that they know firsthand what is available, what is at the high school. I mean, I've had parents come up to me and say, oh, you have EMS? How do you get your child into that? So just so we get that information to them.
And that's such a great comment, Member Tyson, because I think what 6th grade parents and 5th grade parents are going to be able to do much more on a greater level is take a look at their kids' middle school experience and see what courses they will take and get their brains wrapped around that, and then also see how that could lead itself into high school programs like the one that you just mentioned. I think right now there might be some confusion on that. Even when we talked with kids, they felt like the courses that they took at the middle school currently are fun, but they're not overly connected sometimes in how they can choose courses at the high school, and that's an area that we want to work on.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And I guess I was just going to say, I'm not sure exactly what year, 7th or 8th, that they did like a personal inventory of kind of what their likes, dislikes, their strengths, what they kind of gravitate toward. Is that going to be pushed down more to elementary then, to like a 6th grade, so they kind of have that jump to get when they do register for 7th grade? That's something I know my kids that really helped them.
Yeah, Member Corcoran, what you're talking about is the test that we used to give in the state of Minnesota in 8th grade that we stopped as a state doing about 5 or 6 years ago. And we shifted that over to a program called MCIS. And we do that interest inventory now in 8th grade using that tool. What I would say is that kids now taking that tool, we plan to continue to use that, but they're going to have greater background to draw from when they're answering those questions. I don't know that we're going to be pushing that down into elementary school just yet. That hasn't been the context of our conversation, but it's something we certainly could consider.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I would just add, what's exciting about this work is first and foremost, our challenges and our task is to identify what are those career fields and experiences all kids at this age should be exposed to. Then, once that gets identified, how do we create a structure within the middle school for kids to work their way through those exposure experiences so they have a better sense of their skills, their interests, their aptitudes as they move into high school, rather than our current structure, which is really left to the student to choose an interest area, and it might be for the wrong reasons. My buddy's taking that class, or my brother took that class, versus us as a system saying all of our kids should be exposed to all of these areas from which kids can choose the direction they want to go. So that's what's so exciting about this one.
Any other comments, questions?
And I appreciate that. I think it's baked into the system to try and show how the electives work with many careers, because there's so many people I hear that say, oh, art's not good for anything. Ask a CAD designer at high-end engineering how important art is. And it's something that people dismiss, but then it really is in so many careers down the way. And we don't even know what careers might be in the future. So art, music, all the other things that aren't just the core curriculum.
Thank you, Member Luther. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, we will move to positive happenings. And before we go around the room, I noted one thing in the positive happenings flyer, and it's the headline here that says, exceptional FLAS teamwork leads the way. And if that couldn't be a more accurate statement for how our system has gotten through this year, it's the teamwork of the entire team, every staff member from top to bottom, that has made us as successful as we are this year. I just wanted to mention that. With that, we can go around the room with positive happenings. Member Olson?
I just want to start by thanking everyone that took the time to send us wonderful emails. Very much appreciated during the School Board Appreciation Week. And thank you to this preschool class for taking the time to make us these wonderful cards. I did MSBA officer training a couple of Saturdays ago, and we have another one this Saturday. And I was fortunate enough to attend another girls hockey game, Forest Lake against Mounds View. My two nieces play for Mounds View. Forest Lake just had another win, so good job, girls.
Enrico?
I also want to thank people for the really nice emails and thanking us for our work, and it just means a lot to me, so that's all.
Member Tyson?
Yes, I as well want to thank all those touching emails from many, many people. It's really well. Makes you feel really good about what we're doing and what I've been doing. I had a fun visit out at Scant Elementary. I've been driving by, and so I contacted Principal Julie Hall, and I stopped in and had lunch, and I saw the cooking queens leading up to the kitchen, and had a nice visit with her. She is such a warm, warm person, and you can just tell when kids are coming in and going in and out of the office, and she's just really a gem, and I'm so happy we have her out there. And I also got to see Kathy Wolfbauer, who was there. I should have asked her how many years, but she is a gem as well. So that was really fun to stop out at Scant Elementary. I also want to give a shout out to all our wonderful PTO and PTAs. There's the Lionel Lakes is having their readathon, and I've talked to many of the kiddos and the parents about how that's going. Forest View Elementary raised $10,000 with their booster-thon and did like glow-in-the-dark dancing. So huge shout out to, we're blessed in our district with these hardworking parents of these parent groups raising money when they've had to pivot and do everything virtual as well. I also got to watch some fun things. I watched the Forest Lake FLZT on Friday. I just checked the Suburban East and saw that they were on, and that was really fun to watch, the jazz competition. And then I also watched the girls hockey on YouTube on East Ridge. They played Saturday, watched part of that. So that concludes my report, except for one thing, Member Chair. The Equity Lab concluded with the steering group giving a report out to the large group. And so a lot of work has gotten done with that work. We figured it's been about 2 years we've been working on that. And there's just some really excellent plans in place, and through the community group, the education group, and the business group. So now the real work comes in, recruiting people to help and continue that good work and see those things come to fruition. I just wanted to read one quote, because I'm into quotes, but I got to go to the Science Museum's open house. The Science Museum of Minnesota is finally open, and they've won awards for their race exhibit. It's really excellent, and they redid parts of it, and the main thing they did was it's on implicit bias. And here's a quote that made me think of what we've done with this work with the Equity Lab. It says, implicit bias is like the smog that hangs over a community. It becomes the air people breathe. So I want to just send a huge shout out to that group, all those people that have participated and done all that hard work, and I think together we're really going to clear and change the air in Forest Lake. So that concludes my report.
Member Tyson, Member Kettle?
I have three things to cover. One is personal, but I'll tie it into the school district. I received my COVID #1 shot, which I'm in a high-risk area. And the importance for the school district is it allows me now to be able to get back into the schools a little more than I could. So I'm happy about that and the ability to get back. On that note, on Tuesday of this week, I went to the high school and was a room supervisor along with Member Luthner at the high school for the ACT. I had 13 students in a room who worked very, very hard on their ACT test. It was a great experience overall. And I just want to give a shout out to Jeffrey Cavett, the assistant principal at the high school, as well as all of the deans over there and anybody else who participated in that event, because it was pretty flawless. So I have to give a shout out to all of them, as well as Jim Caldwell. I think it was really a good experience. And I would highly recommend it. I spent the better part of 5 hours in a room with 13 students, but because they were working so hard, it was a great experience. So. And last but hardly least, as part of the Buildings and Grounds Committee, I have been trying to monitor the Central Learning Center. It's dear to our heart, my family's, because my son was one of the last ones to attend that school. Unfortunately, the new junior high is a lot closer to us than that one is. But he attended that school, and so I go by every so often, I look at it, I take some pictures, and it's going really well. If you haven't driven by the CLC and taken a look at it, you really should, because there's not much left of it anymore, unfortunately, or fortunately for the district. But anyhow, that concludes my report.
Member Kettle, Member Corcoran?
I also attended the officer training. It was interesting because, I've been treasurer quite a while, and it was interesting to hear. It's my second one this morning. And it was very, good information. I did know, I guess I realized I knew a lot more than I thought, so that was a good thing. So that was really great. And then also the letters, the emails were great too, and they still keep coming in. I think people just realized that they missed it, so they just keep adding. So I've been getting even more, but I just really appreciate that. And I guess I'm back. Well, I should be happy I'm back from Florida. It was beautiful there, so I feel rejuvenated. back to work. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Corcoran. Member Luthner?
Thank you. I also attended officer training. I took my second round this morning for specific clerk training, and while I definitely thank everyone who sent us thank yous for board, I want 110 thank yous from me to the staff that basically do everything that legally a clerk is supposed to do. So the minutes that are taken and the publishing and the interaction with officials for elections are legally the clerk's responsibility, but most school districts have brought it into the day-to-day work of the admins. And Joy, who isn't here, but hopefully listening, can hear how much we appreciate it, that it runs so smoothly, because so much does depend on all the details being perfect. That being said, though, I still definitely ask questions. People in the room might roll their eyes, but if you elected me, I am keeping watch. And then we had a review of Robert's Rules of Orders, which is always fun, just to see the odd things baked into that system. Some of which we do and some of which we don't, but it's always a good idea to have a refresher. Otherwise, in the month, as Member Ketto said, I did the ACTs. I ended up being a one-on-one supervisor. Had a couple meetings that kind of fall into other things. And one of the big things that we had bus driver appreciation at the end of February. So I helped organize a little something for the drivers at Lino, and it was great. So we got everybody, we had to pivot. We couldn't have our normal breakfast buffet, but we had little treat bags that went out to everybody. And as we were arguing over what should go in these treat bags, we decided to just survey. So we asked if they would like a sweet treat, a salty treat, or a healthy treat, or something different. We said other. And overwhelmingly, healthy won. So better than 50% of the bus drivers selected healthy treats. So that's really saying something about what our people are choosing and the examples they are for our children. And I was just very impressed. And not anything against people who chose sweets, because that would have been mine, but we were able to show our appreciation in a way that fit with this month's rules. And I've been checking in with the middle school in Lino, seeing some of what they're doing and how things are changing through the pandemic. And last but certainly not least, I ran into Karen Moorhead, who says she still tunes in, and she's appreciating the work we do, and chewed my ear a little bit about a couple topics. So she is never far away, but she wishes us all well. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Member Luthner. Well, myself, I'd like to say that I had the great opportunity to attend several 8th grade basketball games, which are always a pleasure to be in there, and seeing that I did get into the middle school as well one day and talk to some staff, which is always great. I did want to say too, thank you to all the bus drivers. Obviously, if the kids don't make it to school, we ain't doing much. So without them, that's a critical piece of the puzzle and the team. So with that, we will move on to reports, workshops, and conferences. And before you start, Member Luthner, I also been attending the officer training as well as Member Olson on Saturdays, and it's been great to learn some more things that we have been doing right all along, and a couple of things that we're going to change. So, Member Luthner?
I'll skip officers then. I went to the Ag conference, Ag committee. They haven't had a meeting in over a year, so we had a lot to say. It was a very long meeting, but it was really well detailed. Just a couple of things that 2020 was no exception for the Ag group. All sorts of things got canceled and changed and went virtual. But they did end up having a very good virtual experience, and they were able to bring more kids to, air quotes, state because it was virtual. So they could bring an entire classroom full of kids instead of just a couple that they could transport physically. So that was really nice. They got a couple of grants, one for diversity that proved some funding for exploration, and another that they've been using to give every person who takes a FFA style course, FFA membership. So the membership dollars, which weren't prohibitive, were still prohibitive to some. So they've removed that barrier. So Forest Lake, I think, counts as one of the biggest FFA memberships now. And they're working through how that works so well. More work experience for kids, some courses that include internships in the various fields. So getting some real experience with ag in the world, not just the traditional ag equals farmer, but genetics and other things. And they're also looking for more opportunities like that. So if you know of somebody who wants a internship, they're taking interviews. And they're specifically looking for a vet, because there's a vet tech program getting put together. So they're looking for working current vets to make sure that the most up-to-date information is what they're studying, because you can get real academic and lose sight of what's actually happening in the world. So it was a great group. They're still excited, doing a lot of work, getting things done, and I think they took the prize for last in-person event pre-COVID. So they hung their hat on that one. But no banquet this year.
Thank you, Member Luthner. Any other workshops, conferences?
Just a mention of, there are a number of us looking forward, I think, to the National School Board Association meeting coming up, which is April 8th to the 10th. They also had to pivot, and now it's a virtual conference, which should be really interesting considering it's a National School Board Association. To do it all on Zoom and other means should be interesting. And that's it.
Thank you, Member Kettle. Anyone else? Workshops, conferences? Hearing nothing, we will move on to committee reports. Communications Committee, Member Tyson.
Yes, the updates from the Communications Committee, meeting ECFE. We talked about numbers. ECFE has really good numbers. The Forsyth High School had 70% participation for registration. They developed a new fully online process that was well received, and it's going to continue. It was just really amazing. I heard from a couple of parents I know, and our director of community ed, his daughter's at the high school, he said that it just went really well. Kindergarten roundup enrollments are good. Julie Hull reported that she had 12 families for a virtual roundup, and that it went really well. Then we also talked about the catalog coming out and how it's a real unifier for our district because it goes out district-wide and coming out mid-March, so that's always a big job for them to get the catalog out. And they're always looking for ideas on classes, so if anybody ever has an idea or you talk to a parent or any community member, be sure to send that their way. We also, there's very few districts that continue to do a color catalog, so we're pretty proud of the product that comes out. I just wanted to mention too, because Jeff highlighted what was in our board packet about the exceptional child care. And if you got to read that, the numbers really were astounding in how they had to pivot to serve the tier 1 and tier 2 healthcare workers and back and forth. And, you know, I always looked to see if Corey was getting any gray hair. I just think they did an amazing job and just commend them for all their hard work on serving the child care. It also says that they're back to regular programming before and after school at all elementary sites. So that concludes my report, Member Chair.
Thank you, Member Tyson. Moving to 916, Member Kettle.
916, I attended a virtual board meeting last night, March 3rd from 6 to 7:30. They approved the fiscal year 22 budget assumptions. We approved the policy for COVID-19 face coverings. The superintendent gave a report on COVID vaccinations that they're doing real well with their staff as well. There's a joint powers agreement that's being reviewed right now and will be reviewed with all of the financial directors and superintendents within all of the member districts for 916. The hot topic of the night was the new superintendent search, which is continuing on. They had 12 applicants apply for the superintendent's job with 916. One was from out of state, 2 were from the non-metro area or outstate, and 9 were from the metro area. That was narrowed down to 5 candidates. 2 of them were internal, and 3 of them are external candidates from school districts around the area. On the 17th of March, I think I've said this before, but there'll be a first round of interviews with the 5 candidates, which will then be narrowed down immediately after that round of interviews to the probably 2 or 3 finalists who will be reviewed on March 24th. And one last thing, on March 23rd, and I'll put this out beyond the minutes, but there's going to be a Zoom meeting on March 23rd, a Zoom community meeting for the Page Constitutional Amendment from 6 to 7 p.m. So if anybody is extremely interested in the Page Constitutional Amendment, I would suggest attending on March 23rd from 6 to 7. It's via Zoom, so it's open to the entire public. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Member Kettle. I'll move on to the Policy Committee. Member Luther.
Thank you. The policy committee met virtually. There were 13 people present. We went over the discipline policy. There were no real changes. We did look at it with an eye for equity, just as always. And the next policy was about videos, and that prompted a discussion about digital media, which we do not have a policy on. So Donna will never miss a meeting again because she ended up needing to start looking at a new policy. And teaching and learning, there was a policy regarding the job description that needed updating. So a little housekeeping on that one. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Member Luther. Curriculum, Instruction, and Equity, also Member Luther.
Yep. That one I will skip because the first half was basically the presentation we got from the middle school, and it was great. It was, I took a lot of good notes, and I'm excited for that system to round up and see what it comes from, the ideas and the benchmarking. There were 13 people there, parents and staff, and I'm just skipping. Okay, then we had another presentation on social and emotional learning. Also from the strategic plan on the subject of emotional well-being. There was a grant to learn to work with other districts, and this one pivoted to virtual because of COVID, and it was supposed to be a big networking in-person item, talking about shared experiences, and as an quirky result, COVID was the biggest unifying possible experience. So it worked well with the tools that they were exploring to use common experience. But they're talking about educating the adults in the room, between parents and teachers and paras, to be ready to put social emotional to the next phase for the children so they can have good examples and hopefully grow with maturity. There was also a survey that was done internally about social and emotional health with some surprising, not super surprising results, but it's always hard to see when kids feel like they're struggling. So it's better to know and work on it than to be unaware. So that's part of the mission, to get going on the emotional stress. And closing with trying to stay positive, that modeling is really very important. So I'm glad that that's the message that the faculty and staff are working with. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Member Luthner. We'll move to staff welfare. Member Olson.
Yes, the focus of our meeting was also the middle school course study update, so I'm happy that JP was able to share that again with everybody. I think it's a fabulous program, and
Buildings and grounds. Member Kettle.
We had our last committee meeting on February 18th, and we talked about, as we have in many of the past meetings, the facilities update. There was a pre-meeting out at the athletic field on Wednesday, February 25th. They're looking at a ground lease that's needed to be developed. We need some collateral for financing for the football field and the turf field that's going to be installed. Finance on the project, there's no changes right now, so we are on schedule and on budget. If there are any dollars left, I found it interesting, we started talking about the possibility, if we have any dollars left, we could possibly use them for a middle school track improvement, which really needs improvement as well. But that'll all depend on how this whole project comes together. We talked about the bipolar air exchange. We talked about the CLC, and I already talked a little bit about that. The Montessori is obviously part of the building has been demolished. The parking lot in the back is going to be worked on, and they're going to redo the entire parking lot. There's lots of space out there if you get behind the Central Learning Center. They're looking at redoing all of that parking, including the parking that's next to the field over there, so the ball field over there. And the tear down should end by the end of May at the latest, it looks like. And June, July, and August are the months that are looked at for construction of the building, to redo the building and have it done. And Bill Schwartz, obviously, another shout out to Bill. Bill's a great guy. Bill really works awfully hard. And Bill gave a report on the schools, which I won't go into at this point, but a shout out to Bill. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Member Kettle. We'll move to equity in our schools. Member Rayfield.
thank you. So we had our equity steering team meeting 2 days ago in Marceline, Dubois. Equity Alliance helped guide a bunch of groups talking about expanding our instruction to be culturally relevant. And we had our Black History Month virtual program that was put on by the African Ancestral Affinity Group, the Forsyth High School Black Student Union, and the African American Leaders at middle school. And that was hosted by Shenji, and that was a virtual program.
Member Rayfield. We'll move to community education. Member Kettle.
On community ed, we had Kyle Young come in and talk about athletics and facilities was probably the main topic of the meeting. And Kyle did a really excellent job. Another shout out to Kyle and all of the hard work that he does for community education. The summer 2020 camps were completed even though we had to adjust for COVID. I don't know how to sum this up, but the theme of the meeting was how much community ed has had to adjust to make all of this work. And they've done an outstanding job at it. One example would be community ed basketball, which I'm very familiar with. In fact, I refereed for a while for it. The community ed basketball used to be in multiple sites, right? Well, now with COVID, that's just too hard to control. And so Kyle and everybody else came up with a plan to incorporate all of it into the middle school. And so now all of the community ed games are played, and it's just, I don't know how to express it, but it's a highly creative way that we've addressed COVID in this district right now. And as I think Member Tyson mentioned earlier, the catalog, there is virtually nobody in the state that puts out a catalog to the quality that we do. The catalogs that are being produced at maybe 5 other districts at the most are probably like half pages folded in half and black and white kind of stuff. So the catalog that they're doing is outstanding. Until a very last minute, they have to make adjustments to the catalog, as we all know, because again of COVID and everything else happening. So we took a look at that. We talked about baseball, some of the new programs coming up in the sports camps, the new gyms, and how I'll end with this, but how the gyms are in our area now because of the quality of the gyms based on all the funding that the community gave us. The gyms are being used in very unique ways. I mean, there's some more religious things happening, services. There's dance groups that are coming into the gyms from outside the community because many of those communities aren't allowing anybody into their gyms or facilities because of COVID. So they're coming to us and using our facilities and they're seeing it, and we're getting really excellent response to our facilities. People are saying, wow, I wish we had this kind of facility in our community. So it's a kudos to community ed and to everybody, including the community, for all of that work. So that ends my report.
Thank you, Member Kettle. We'll move to the Finance Committee. Member Corcoran.
First, we went over the fiscal year 21 budget status. Jackie Heigl from MFKR is going to be coming to our next meeting to look at the revenue, kind of do kind of an overview of where we're at. Legislative update, again, we talked about, what the potential for funding for next year would be. We're hoping for 2 and 2, but we also decided that we really don't know what to expect. And we're budgeting for 2022, 100 student loss. Not sure how that's going to fall. And we also talked a little bit about the GEARS and ESSER money. I'm hoping to get additional funds for that. I'm not exactly sure how much that's going to be. And we also talked about possibly buying some cybersecurity insurance for risk management. It's something that a lot of businesses do, and school districts are starting to look at it now because of all, things out there in, the IT world of people hacking and taking information, and just try to keep everybody's information safe. So that's something that Director Martini's looking at right now. And also the transportation bill is also out there, still not sure about the progress of that, but I know Dr. Massey talked a little bit about that. So that concludes our report.
Thank you, Member Corcoran. We'll move to the City of Forest Lake. Member Tyson.
Yes, they have their upcoming meeting on Monday, March 8th, and they also met on February 22nd. I listened to some of that meeting. There's an online engagement for County Highway 33, which is Everton Avenue. So people can get on their website and click right on there if they want to give information or feedback. There's also some discussions, and Hannah from the Times wrote an article between the City of Forest Lake and FLA. Typically the city has run the grounds at Fenway Field or maintained the grounds, and FLA has done the fees. So they're negotiating how they're going to work together, or it sounds like to me that the city wants to take that all on now. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Member Tyson. With that, we'll move on to the FAST Assessment Data Report. Dr. Kamatsu.
Yeah, I will introduce Roy here as he works his way onto the screen. Remember, it was almost to the date a year ago when we shifted from in-person learning to distance learning for the remainder of the spring and in and out of learning models. And chief among our many concerns is student learning through this incredibly difficult 12 months, frankly. And we have been paying close attention to learning loss and addressing that every chance we can at the classroom level, extended day, summer school. And it's fitting to now take a look at some of the data that's coming through that will give us a reflection of where kids are at with respect to literacy and math, especially at the elementary level and middle school level. There's some good news here, and then there's some pieces that cause some concern that we frankly would have expected. So, Roy, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Am I doing this right? Okay, we give several tests from Fastbridge to give us some information about our students' level of achievement at several points during the school year. The main ones are A Math and A Reading. They're adaptive tests.
Lloyd, are you thinking you're sharing your screen? We don't see your screen if you're intending to.
You don't see my screen? Okay. I'm not sure what I can do. Let's see.
There you go.
There you go.
Good, you're good, Lloyd.
Okay, we're good. We've been using this for about 4 years now, primarily with our elementary students, but also with our middle school students. And what I've prepared are some comparisons from year to year. Here I have median fall scores by grade for the past 4 years. So this includes this past fall as well. And you see that over the 4 years, there's a little bit of moving around up and down. And the important thing to note is that this year, which is the yellow-orange line to the far right of each set, is within the range of variability that we normally see. This is for reading, and this is for math. Again, you see maybe a little bit more of impact on math compared to reading this past year, or the current year, I guess we can say. One thing, though, I call your attention to is that the math scores and the reading scores are on different scales. So you'll notice that the range here is going up to 240 in math, whereas in reading, it's going up to 600. So the range of scores preferred by each subject also differs. So you've got to be careful when comparing reading to math performance when you're looking at scores, anything based on scores. So again, our reading scores look pretty much like they have in other years this past fall. Our math scores may be a little reduced compared to other years. And I think that's the finding that's generally reported, more of an impact on math than on reading. The picture actually is somewhat more nuanced than that. Among the other measures that A Math and A Reading give us is something we call the risk level. The risk is defined as high, so a student may be at high risk when not meeting state standards, for a particular grade. A student might be at some risk. A student can be at low risk, or what we refer to in our district as well above average, but A. Generally, this is viewed as like a college pathway level of performance. Generally, the highest 25-30% of students are there. Here's a pattern that we see and have seen for a number of years, where our kindergarten students perform, well, not as well as our older students. So kindergarten, first grade, here, this is math. Again, you want the red and the orange to be as low as possible, the green and the blue to be as large as possible. And you see that by second grade, we start showing considerable improvement. and third grade. Looking year by year, it's a little uneven, but maybe a little bit of impact. That is, our red and orange regions are a little bit higher this year. They have been in past years. Not so with kindergarten, which you might expect if the kids don't have much in the way of school experience that was disrupted prior to entering. This is reading. And here, notice that our orange and red areas are larger than in math. But again, the pattern where our youngest students seem to be having more trouble than our slightly older students. And you'll see that as we go up to the higher grades. Here's math, and again, notice that we're at about 30% more or less of students at high risk or some risk for not meeting standards. When we start getting to 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, the percentage of students at risk gets to be pretty low. And it's pretty consistent this year with prior years, again. Math, and now reading. Here, the interesting thing is that there seems to be more of an impact on our reading scores rather than our math scores. So there seems to be more of a year-to-year effect in reading than in math. One interesting thing to think about is to look at the winter scores, which means now we're looking at the impact of having school, well, for our youngest students, face-to-face instruction, but in this environment of a lot of mitigation and a lot of additional rules and things. And again, maybe a little bit of impact, but really not much, not the kind of impact that you might expect to see given how worried everyone's been. But again, at least in Forest Lake, our younger students, more of an impact on reading than on math. Here are our older students. And you see that our orange and red bars portions are pretty little. Here's reading, but again, maybe a little bit more impact on reading. This graph averages across all grades, and what it's looking at is the change in the students scored from the previous falls, or the first data point would be the fall of 2017 to the fall of 2018. The middle point is the change in a student's score on average from the fall of 2018 to fall of 2019. And this last point represents the current year. So how much did a student's score change from last fall to this fall? Here you see the impact of the difference in the scaling of the scores. So the reading scores are a lot higher than the math scores, but that's not because the students are doing better in reading than math, but because the scores are just set up that way. What you can interpret, however, is the slopes of the lines. And here, when we look at fall scores, that is changes from previous fall to this fall, there's a big impact, right, in both reading and math. The dotted line represents winter to winter. The solid line represents fall to fall. And what's really interesting is if we compare the fall to fall scores to the winter to winter scores, we see that there's much less impact on the winter to winter scores than on the fall to fall scores, which suggests that maybe last spring was pretty hard on students, and they didn't make as much progress as they ordinarily would. But getting into the school year, so getting into the winter term, we seem to have mitigated that loss considerably. Well, I guess I shouldn't call it a loss, but a slowdown in students' growth.
Hey, Lloyd? You know,
Yes.
I would attribute the dotted line, winter to winter, to the fact that we came back in person this school year. So we came out of last spring with in-person learning. And all but about 6 weeks at the elementary level, we've been in person this year. Being able to make up that steeper loss on the solid line with the dotted line, winter to winter. So different time frame shows a more responsive track around learning than the solid line, which will go from fall to fall, capturing that gap, including the distance learning in the spring.
Yeah, no, I agree that, this clearly demonstrates that what we've been doing this year has really benefited students. We brought them along very well since the fall. This breaks it down by grade level. These are the elementary grades, average math growth. And here you see a typical pattern of generally more growth at the younger grades, so growth from kindergarten to first grade and first grade to second grade. This is an oddity. It's sixth grade. For students in sixth grade, we show a lot of growth, or at least we had previously, and higher grades. This is math. This is reading. And again, right, kids make a lot of growth, a lot of progress early on, and it slows down as they get older. It's also the case that the impact on their rate of growth was greater at the younger grades than the older grades. So this is reading and this is math, and it's the same pattern, greater impact on the younger kids. Here's secondary average fall math growth, and it continues the pattern. These students are older still than the elementary ones. And here's reading. There has been a gradual decline, but there's no pivot point. That is, there's no change in the trend as we come to this past fall. Here's winter to winter math growth at the elementary grades. And again, you see that the slowdown in growth for the current school year is really much less than it was in fall. And here is your reading. And again, yes, some slowing down of growth, but nowhere near the kind of impact that we had seen in the fall. Our secondary students did not test this winter, so we can't do the winter-to-winter growth graphs after 6th grade. But that's where we are right now. I think it speaks well to the planning that we did for this year and teachers' execution of the plan. You know, we can't say that the pandemic hasn't had any impact on our kids and kids' academic performance, but it's really not as bad as I think a lot of parents have worried about.
And we'll be testing again in the spring, which will give us a reflection of the impact from winter to spring or from the fall through the course of the school year.
That's right. MCA testing will also be going on this spring. Are there any questions? I can provide this PDF to Joy so that she can make sure everyone can get a copy.
That'd be great.
Yeah. that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I would definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a lot of
Does anybody
information.
have questions or comments? Member Rayfield?
Yes, Dr. Conte, I just have a question. Was there any ability to see how many kids had really done poorly? You know what I mean? Is that, I think in here, even when we break it up into 4 different gradations, we see some averaging within those. Have we seen that, that the number of kids that, you know, just dropped out essentially, are we able to see anything like that and see a growth, or whether it's maybe as worse than we thought or better than we thought, or something that we have to work on to get those kids back in, or maybe through summer school? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, when we look at the whole group this way, yes, there are some individual kids who their growth is a lot less than you expect. But that happens every year, that there are a few kids who really seem to not do as well as their trend would suggest that they would. But one thing that I haven't had a chance yet to look at carefully is whether certain groups of kids were more highly impacted than others. We already see some impact based on age, right? The younger kids' academics seem to have been affected more than the older kids. But it may well be that other demographic characteristics will also predict how much of an impact the pandemic has had. And I'm continuing to look at that.
All right, thank you.
Member Rayfield, perhaps part of your question, if I can infer, is getting at now what? In terms of, now that we know that there are kids that might be struggling, how do we know that, and what do we do programmatically? What I can tell you is each of the principals have access to their kids and their data. I've seen their spreadsheets as they have begun to tease out which kids are at high risk, low risk. And then that translates to PLCs and grade level meetings, where principals are working directly with classroom teachers. These are 3 kids in your classroom that are at low risk. What adjustments do we need to make with small group instruction? Who needs a tier 2 or more instruction? And then who might even need a tier 3 or reading intervention with our academic support specialist, a position we added with our recommendation. So that work is happening tomorrow, a professional development day with the PLCs. Teachers are now digging into which kids in their classrooms need additional support, more intensive instruction.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that, because I think, I mean, even if it's just one kid who's fallen off the map, we don't want to let averaging hide that student. We want to find them, help get them back on track.
Now, this data is good from an aggregate, big picture standpoint, but it's got specific power at the classroom level and teacher level. At the end of the day tomorrow, there won't be a teacher who doesn't know which kid or 2 or 3 in his or her classroom need more support and instruction to make up even more gains.
Yeah, thank you. Member Luther?
I have a question. Maybe it can't be answered because is there a way to measure who isn't there, like who just didn't take the test that we would have expected them to take the test? I know that there's kids that had to take this from home or that didn't enroll this year. And I know that's data you obviously don't have, but is there any way to account, do we have the same kids last year as this year and how are they doing? I know that's some of the numbers, but to Member Rayfield's, like, who did we lose? Who do we have no data on? And do we dig in on that? We can't find the kids that unenrolled, but ones that just declined to take the test or have dropped off the map of it.
You know, at least with our fall data, the number of kids tested at each grade level did not depart too much from what we typically see. So at least with the fall data, I'm relatively confident that the averages for this year can be compared to the averages for prior years. With the winter data, and I don't know what the spring data will look like, I do get a little more worried that we don't have measurements from a fair number of kids.
Member Tyson?
So I'm curious, Lloyd, do you think that, does anything coincide with when we switched from 1.0 to the 2.0? To distance learning, did it seem to improve?
You know,
when you did the fall and the...
Yeah, certainly the aggregated results, we look at them like this, aren't that sensitive to timing, because even though we say these are the fall scores, really those scores are collected over a 3 or 4 week period, and this year even longer. So tracking the impact of the learning model changes with this kind of assessment is pretty difficult. That's where you really need to look at the classroom level assessments.
Okay. Yeah, well, as you can imagine, parents do have their concerns, and I mean,
Sure.
What the superintendent has shared, that we can granular take it right down to the kid, to the classroom, and I mean, that's just excellent. We're going to be able to really get on that and make improvements there for these students. Were you surprised that the younger, I mean, I'm not, that the younger had that difficulty?
I was a little surprised, although I guess looking at my own kids, the youngest one is having the hardest time coping with distance learning. Our kids are all distance learning. Mm-hmm. What I don't have measured here are the impacts on social and emotional learning. And I would not be surprised if, given these academic results, it's linked to greater impact on social emotional characteristics for the younger kids.
Good point, Drew. When do the MCAs start then?
The MCA testing window opens next week.
Okay.
We won't be testing immediately. Well, the high school science, I think, and reading may start up very soon thereafter, after we come back from break. They're talking about possibly extending the window a little bit, which means that we wouldn't be done testing until late May. So it's going to be a really long window to try to give schools time to reach all of their kids. One option that has been ruled out is remote administration of MCA. So there's no taking the test at home kind of thing. So I'm not real sure what impact that will have on participation rates.
Well, during this pandemic, you are just so valuable as you have been for so many years. But I mean, we're so lucky to have this position in our district and somebody like you that can bring us this excellent data. So thank you, Lloyd.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Dr. Kamatsu. I appreciate the data and the level of data as well. It's nice to be able to crunch that data and see exactly what's going on. So with that, we will. Go ahead.
Super, thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move to the superintendent report. Dr. Massey?
Thank you very much. Given the amount of time we have invested in the board meeting already, I'll try to work fairly quickly through a number of slides here. As Tim pulls up the presentation, as Member Tyson indicated, we have fortunately spent some really good time in our Everyone Belongs project, and I want to just give you a quick highlight of the framework that drives our Everyone Belongs project, that drove the Innovation Lab, the steering committee work. The Everyone Belongs project is rooted in the vision that to ensure that all individuals and families are welcome and belong. And the mission that drives this is to create a welcoming and inclusive community, increase intercultural awareness and leadership, expand intercultural competence as it relates to our community and schools, enhance our schools and communities' culture to support diversity, equity, and belonging, provide a strategic structure for creating inclusive communities, and foster intercultural relationships both internally and externally. And the core value that drives our work is that we come to this work with positive intent, and people come at different points in their journey around equity and inclusion and diversity and cultural awareness and cultural competence. What we are as a community organization around Everyone Belongs is, and what we are not is just as important, I think, as what we are. We are not, as an Everyone Belongs project, a partisan or political initiative. We are very clear about that. And we are not certainly a political action committee, nor are we religiously affiliated. I'm going to just show kind of a framework that helps us define diversity, inclusion, and equity. This will be on our website, our district website. It'll be on community website by way of our district. And it shows that in order to have a community of belonging, you really need all three of these elements. And these circles show if you have equity and inclusion without diversity, what the result looks like. If you have diversity and inclusion without equity. So all three of these are integral. to creating a community of belonging. We also have a set of definitions that further define this work, and I'm going to move quickly through these definitions around diversity, equity, and inclusion. In addition to our work around equity, when we think about our work in professional development, our work around developing cultural competence in our staff, that is about our own personal growth and professional growth, which is critical. But that doesn't necessarily change the experience that we give kids. So when we think about the instructional program and the instructional experience we provide for our kids, that gets at some of the systemic change and growth that we need to be undertaking as a district. We think about the literature, the experiences, the learning tools, the curriculum and content that we engage kids in. Is it culturally responsive? Does it highlight the leaders and the culture and the histories and the art of our students of color? We're engaging with the Leadership Academy to help us work through this as a curriculum review team in English language arts. And when the new standards in social studies are adopted, they will be working with our teams in that area as well. So some really exciting work, and our staff teams in English language arts are doing some amazing work. Expanding, not wiping clear our current curriculum. There's so much good about what we do, but expanding our curriculum so that our kids see themselves in the stories and the literature and the content and the histories that we share and engage our kids in. It wouldn't be a superintendent report if I didn't get into COVID numbers. These charts you see almost weekly from me, but every week they get updated. And I would highlight our 3 counties and the data on the far right side of each of these counties in Okeechobee and Washington County. You can see that brown bar is our latest data point for our 3 counties. Total COVID cases in our community are lower now than they were at the start of the year, which is remarkable when you think about where we've come, the surge that we had around the holiday time, and now our current COVID cases are lower than they were at the start of the year. And the test positivity rate is almost as low as it was back in last March and April. Test positivity rate, again, shows, regardless of the number of tests you get, what's the positivity rate of the return on those tests. Right now, today's number was actually below 2%, which is remarkable. The Minnesota Department of Health has indicated 5% is that threshold where we can consider the community relatively safe for things being more open than they were around the holiday season, and certainly for schools to be open. I've got a 3-week run with test positivity rate below 3.5% on my calculation. So our decision to have our elementary kids in school and on March 22nd, our secondary kids back full-time is supported by this data. And you can also see when we look at our data from, this is test positivity rate. When we look at our data from the county perspective, you can see a similar pattern with the spike around the holiday season and now a fairly steady pattern of low level of COVID within the community. Any questions on any of this data before I move on? Okay. Once again, all things COVID, as I mentioned, we are back in person at the secondary level March 22nd. That's a week following spring break. So we have spring break starting this upcoming week. We have a full week of our current model before we bring all kids back. We're asking families, if they travel, to monitor themselves for illness or exposure, and making sure they're quarantining if they have been exposed or not feeling well, and making sure they're testing as well. I give the state a lot of credit, and I give Washington County, frankly, a lot of credit for their vaccination efforts. I believe that by March 22nd, almost all of our staff that have direct contact with kids will have been vaccinated with at least one dose, if not two, if they want to be vaccinated. So that again supports our plan to have our kids back again at the elementary and at the secondary level. CDC and the Minnesota Department of Health is adopting shorter quarantine periods, which is also good news for kids and staff if they are exposed. It requires to be symptom-free and to have a negative test, but we're utilizing a 7 or 10-day quarantine period based on those type protocols. Quick legislative update. The budget forecast on the latest forecast at the end of February shows a $1.6 billion state surplus. That is a change from a negative $1.3 billion that was forecasted last November. The state is in far better shape with federal stimulus dollars and the economy beginning to move forward and generate revenues for the state. We're all following the federal stimulus plan number 3, the $1.9 trillion plan that's been approved in the House, being debated in the Senate. We'll see if that gets passed. There are monies there for schools nationwide, states, state and local governments as well. Both of those pieces, if passed, would be significant for the state and significant for the district. As was mentioned earlier, our transportation sparsity bill at the legislature has had a hearing in the Senate and was laid over in the Senate for inclusion in the omnibus education bill. We have a hearing next week in the House on our transportation bill. We're optimistic that we might gain some traction this year. It has been extremely well received in the Senate committee, controlled by and managed by the Republicans, and I think we'll get a similar favorable hearing in the House. And as was mentioned, not happening at the CLC, as you can see in these very latest pictures. On the upper left, that is the southern part of the building, the 3-story structure and the gym, and then those classrooms on the southernmost part of the building. The CLC entrance you see there on the right-hand side of the screen, that remains intact all the way up to the edge of the building that you see on the upper right. Those classrooms that have been taken down were the old 9th grade classrooms and an art classroom in the old central building that member Kettle mentioned, and the Montessori classrooms as well. Those were in pretty rough shape from a mechanical standpoint, and then structurally and mechanically on the southern part of the building. The best part of the building, the pieces and the parts of the building that we're retaining, are in pretty good shape, and we'll be transitioning the STEP program from the building that we're renting on Broadway into the building. So a lot happening here and some exciting development. With that, that concludes my report.
Any questions or comments? Member Kevin?
I just have a comment. As it goes back to the $1.9 trillion legislation going on right now. As I walked out the door to come to the meeting tonight, as I understand it, that did pass through the Senate. It passed on basically a tie vote with Vice President Harris breaking the tie. So anyway, it sounds like it's passed.
Yeah, that was procedural, and now it will continue for debate and ultimately approval, and then conference committees bringing the 2 different bills together, and hopefully passage by mid-March.
Any other questions, comments? I look forward to the day that we don't have a COVID report.
Yes, yay.
Gonna miss the graphs.
You can see we're sort of getting there. There are a number of slides here that are not COVID related, so
How
we're
many
in a
colors
transition.
are there in Excel?
I'm sorry?
How many colors are there in Excel to make the bars? Have you run out yet?
We'll find out. We'll just start getting skinnier.
I just want to add that there's a lot of excitement around the 22nd of March. I'm hearing really positive things.
The
They're
staff are
ready to
getting more-
be in there.
Yeah, with the vaccines going on at the rate they are, the staff are more and more comfortable with that transition.
It's just like coming together.
One here.
With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, and 7.6 as listed on the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor of passing the consent agenda signify by aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. With that, I would like to acknowledge Jan Stoffer, who is a middle school art teacher who is retiring. She has 29 years in the district, so I'd like to thank her for her service with the passage of that.
I just want to chime in for one quick second. I know we're going long here, but my daughter's had her for art, and she's 29 years. That's remarkable, but she is a very wonderful, warm. She really gets kids excited about her class and her course. So congratulations to Jan.
Thank you, Member Tyson. We'll move on to...
Mr. Chair, before you move on to the next piece, if I can take just a moment and acknowledge one of the significant additional approvals that you just did, and that's the hiring of our next Director of Teaching and Learning.
Oh, yes. Should have said that.
First of all, we're hiring because we are losing Director Georgie from her position. She has led us in a curriculum way in the Teaching and Learning Department through a referendum and the rebuilding of our Department of Teaching and Learning, which is an incredibly strong program, advancing some incredible programs for kids. She's going to be dearly missed, and she has left just a hallmark impression on our district, and she's just an exceptionally talented individual. With that, we held interviews, and we interviewed 7 really strong candidates for the Director of Teaching and Learning, some incredible candidates, and it was a tough decision. And ultimately, Mr. J.P. Jacobson, who you saw earlier, has been selected to fill that position. Just real quickly, let me highlight. He's got a BA degree in elementary education from Concordia Moorhead, master's in educational leadership from the University of Nevada, and is currently pursuing his doctorate in educational administration from Bethel University. He's got elementary and middle school classroom teaching experience. He's been a middle school dean, assistant principal, and principal at the middle school level, district-wide technology director in Shakopee before coming to Forest Lake. And for the last 6 years, he's been, as you know, our principal at Forest Lake Area Middle School. And for 1 year, ran two junior highs and spearheaded the merging of those 2 junior highs to 1 middle school. Just a monumental task that has positioned our middle school in such a positive way. So with that, I'd ask Mr. Jacobson to jump on the screen and just say a couple of words.
Thank you for all of that, and thank you for this great opportunity. To say that I'm both humbled and excited at the same time would be an understatement. For me, when I think back of the people who have built this office beforehand, that of Linda Madsen, and I started Jennifer Tolsman for the past 5 years under the leadership of Diane Georgie. I'm just honored to be the next in that kind of talented and committed educators, and so I have every intent to give it my all, just as I've attempted to do the last 6 years here in the district at the middle school, and hope to lead in the same way that those individuals have, and making sure that again, I said earlier, and I meant it, one of the most important aspects of our school districts, which is our academic program, and making sure that we are best in class in the area in that regard. So thank you to the committee for ultimately having selecting me, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity and the challenge.
Thank you, JP. I appreciate all you've done for our district. It's great to see you moving into this role, and I'm excited for where you'll take it.
Absolutely.
Well said, Jeff.
All right. With that, we will continue on. We'll move to what is now 8.0.1, which is the donations. Member Kettle, would you like to read them, or would you like me to do it?
I can do it, that's fine.
Perfect.
For donations for this month, we had a total donations to the district of $10,115.47. There are a few that need to be recognized, I think, just as somewhat exceptional. First of all, was a 2003 Ford Explorer donated by Michelle Lynn to the Forest Lake High School automotive program, which I thought was outstanding. $7,667.55 were donated by the Forest Lake Gymnastics Booster Club for payment for two part-time assistant coaches. There was a $1,000 donation from Suicide Prevention Collaborative to Lino Lakes Elementary for suicide prevention, and $1,125 was donated by Faith Lutheran Church for the Forest Lake area schools family supporting families financially struggling. Again, the total donations from everyone was $10,115.47. On behalf of the district, we would like to thank all of those individuals and organizations who donated to our schools. Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion to accept the donations as read?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. I was debating if we needed
Aye.
to. Motion passes. All right. Moving on, 8.1, school board member reimbursement guideline policy 103A. Dr. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This policy is up for action tonight, and the administration is recommending approval with just one small change to the policy, and that's on the second page of the policy, really just catching up the stipend figure to what's been recently and previously approved by the board, moving that from 410 to 508.40. That's actually catching up a couple of years of changes to that policy. Administration recommends approval.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the school board member reimbursement policy?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. Member Clerk, would you please take a roll call?
Member Kiddo.
Aye.
Member Kiddo votes aye. Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield.
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson.
Aye.
Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson.
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luther votes aye. Member Corcoran.
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye.
Motion passes. We'll move to 8.2, licensure policy 416. Dr. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administration is recommending approval tonight of this policy update, and really the only change going on here is modifying the reference to the Minnesota education licensing system, now including the language of the new licensing organization called the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board, PELSB. So with that change, administration recommends approval.
Do we have a motion to approve the licensure policy?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. Member Clerk?
Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luther votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Kiddo?
Aye.
Kiddo votes aye.
Motion passes. We'll move on to 8.3, consultation leave of absence policy 424. Dr. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This policy was last updated in 1979, so it's due for a couple of language updates. Most notably indicating that an employee who is leaving their work assignment to provide consultation during the workday that they're using his or her own applicable accrual leave to do so, and indicating, and specifically, that the superintendent or designee would be the approving authority for the district. And with that, administration recommends approval.
Do we have a motion to approve the consultation leave?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
This one lasts as long.
Solid 4 years.
I'd like to point out, I was 5. So any further,
Yeah.
any further discussion? Hearing none, Member Clerk, would you please take a roll call?
Member Rayfield.
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson.
Aye.
Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson.
Aye.
Peterson votes aye. Member Luthner votes aye. Member Corcoran. Aye. Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto.
Aye.
Member Ketto votes aye. Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye.
All right, we'll move on to 8.4, the Wellness Incentive Program Policy 437. Dr. Massey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administration recommends approval of the update of this particular policy with a change on the second page of the policy, and that's referencing the Employee Benefits Committee and district administration being responsible for establishing the incentives around the wellness program and promotions. So with that, administration recommends approval.
We have a motion to approve the Wellness Incentive Program.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Member Clerk?
Member Tyson.
Aye.
Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson.
Aye.
Peterson votes aye. Member Luthner votes aye. Member Corcoran.
Aye.
Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto.
Aye.
Member Ketto votes aye. Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield.
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye.
Motion passes. With that, we'll move to 8.5, School Bus Leasing. Director Martini.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is a second reading. We looked at this a month ago, so we're asking you to approve leasing 22 regular buses.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the leasing of 22 buses?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Member Rayfield?
Director Martini, so are there buses that are then being, no longer used, or what's going on?
So we are currently leasing 2020 versions, 22 of those, and Mr. Gray did not want to purchase any of those. So that's one beautiful aspect about this whole process, is he can decide whether or not that would be a good add to our fleet.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion?
I just have one thing to add. So Larry, it's been such a good program for us in many ways, correct?
Yes.
I mean, we're so blessed that we still have our own fleet of buses, and this is really, we get new buses every couple of years. How long have we had this leasing program now?
I think we're in our 8th year of
Yeah.
doing leasing in this fashion. So those are some good decisions.
Yes, excellent.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Member Clerk, would you please take a roll call?
Member Peterson.
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luthner votes aye. Member Corcoran.
Aye.
Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto.
Aye.
Member Ketto votes aye. Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield.
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson.
Aye.
Tyson votes aye.
Motion passes. We'll move to 8.6, School Board Member Employment. Dr. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you can see in the notation on this particular item, it states that to be approved at the start of each fiscal year, the school board must vote to approve a board member to be initially employed or to continue employment in the district. And you can see the Minnesota statutes that this requirement references. And we have 2 board members who are employed in the district as substitute teachers, Member Luthner and Member Kettle. And this action would approve both Member Kettle and Member Luthner to be employed in that capacity during the school year. A little bit of background here. The board is required to provide this as an entity if members are working in the district. Along with that comes the responsibility of the board to revoke that, should the board feel inclined to revoke that permission to work in the district. So it gives the board some latitude and authority over who's working in the district, lest that becomes problematic in any way in terms of their function as a board. So administration is recommending that you provide that approval for both Member Luthner and Member Cutto to continue this year. We'll do this annually as well.
We have a motion for 8.6 to allow the 2 school board members to continue employment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
I have a question. If somebody else were to become employed from now until the end of the year, do we have to have another vote?
We will.
Okay, so you have to specifically point out which member is employed.
Yeah, we need to identify by name, so if Joe, you were to become employed in any particular way, we'd have to, at that nearest board meeting, we'd have a similar motion.
Member
I
Tyson?
just have one quick question for the superintendent. So then who monitors the $8,000 cap? Is that the district's responsibility or just the
Well,
board
it's going to
member?
be the board member and with the assistance from payroll.
Okay, so.
Member Parker?
I just want to mention, we discussed this actually at officer training today, about the $8,000. It's been that amount for a long time, I believe, like years. And it's something they're actually discussing eventually increasing. Because I guess what happens is, I mean, to be a pair or anything, it's not very much money. And so it does really stop people from working for the district, for you, right?
Yeah.
And so some people say they do so much and then they actually have to volunteer their time. They can't even accept payment. So it's been an issue. So I just want you to know that has been looked at and continue to be looked at.
We'll continue to monitor that and
Yeah.
provide adjustments if
In my training, they said you're not even technically allowed to volunteer, because if you could have been paid, then it's the federal government has words about that.
So it's a sticky, it is.
It's
not a lot of money.
And, right, written down, it looks, I'm glad I don't owe it, but it, many other people, when you're looking at bus drivers and substitute teachers, which are the majority of what people end up doing on boards, that you couldn't be a bus driver for the whole year.
Right.
No.
Right.
And so it ends up with some continuity issues. So they are trying to see if it could change, but I think that's been trying to be changed for the last 5 years.
It's been a while, yeah.
And you can see how it impacts a district our size, but in smaller communities where the school district might be the largest employer, well, it could be even more problematic.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think you have a point of order. Cool to say that even. Am I allowed to vote on this or should I abstain? I'm not sure if this requires our full votes or if I can abstain because it's personnel. I would prefer to
That's a
abstain.
good question.
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe
In
Alice.
the interest of,
I thought of that.
Yeah,
go ahead, Madam Chair.
I was going to say, I would recommend that you abstain because you will directly benefit from this vote.
Right.
Financially.
I would prefer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you say
Exactly.
And an abstain counts toward the majority, should it.
We all learned.
Still gonna have to call the roll.
I will still call the roll. Anybody else want to do it?
Don't get out of there.
All right. Well, with any further discussion? Hearing none, Member Clerk, would you please take a roll call?
Member Luthner abstains. Member Corcoran.
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto.
Abstain.
Member Ketto also abstains. Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield.
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson.
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. And Member Peterson.
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye.
All right, motion passes. We will move on to 8.7, resolution relating to the financing of a proposed project to be undertaken by the school district, establishing compliance with reimbursement bond regulations under the Internal Revenue Code. Director Martini.
We've seen this type of resolution many times in the past. Whenever we've done financing, we have expenses that occur prior to that financing closing, then we've done a reimbursement resolution. We expect Ellers will come to the school board sometime in the next month or two to do the certificates of participation, but we have incurred design expenses and are now beginning to incur contractor mobilization expenses. We'd like you to approve this so that those can be included in the project once we get the financing locked in.
All right. May we have a motion to entertain the resolution?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. Member Clerk?
Member Kiddo?
Aye.
Member Kiddo votes aye. Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luther votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Director Martini.
Yes.
With that, we'll move to 8.8, approve the 2020-22 custodial maintenance and laundry employee agreement. Dr. Massey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm excited to bring this contract to you tonight for your approval and express my gratitude to the custodial group for their ratification of this agreement. There are three components I would point out in changes to this agreement. The first would be on page 20. You'll see there under the 403B matching piece, a $250 annual increase for each of those stages with the 403B. On page 26, you'll see a $150 increase for each of the various licensures and certifications that a custodian may hold, whether that's a first class or second class engineer, boiler license, chief engineer, all those different licensure pieces would receive a $150 increase for each of those. And then within board parameters, you'll see in wage increases in the first year a 2% and a 0% in the second year. And with the other contracts that you have approved, there's a similar memorandum of understanding that should there be additional revenues to the district may consider reopening the contract to adjust wages in the second year. With that, administration recommends approval.
We have a motion to approve 8.8.
Second.
A motion and a second. Do we have discussion? Hearing none. Member Clerk, would you please take a roll call?
Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luther votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Kiddo?
Aye.
Kiddo votes aye.
Motion passes.
I just said, I should have said this before we voted, but I just want to thank our custodial staff. And I appreciate the good faith that all our bargaining groups come to for these contracts, but I also want to just say thank you for the work they've done for our district, and it's just been such a good bunch of people that we have working for us.
Well said.
Thank you, Member Rayfield. All right, that we will move on to new business. 9.1, first reading, job description, Director of Teaching and Learning Policy 214.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, this is a first reading, so no action required tonight. And with the interviewing of for the replacement for Diane Georgie, we recognize as we went through the job description that it was last updated in 2007. And fortunately, things evolve and change in the world of teaching and learning as they should. So some of those changes are captured, and you'll see in this updated job description. I would point those to you and have you take a look at those between now and the next meeting, where we'll ask for approval of these updates.
Move on to 9.2, the first reading of the discipline policy. Member Tyson, did you have something?
No, sorry.
Oh, saw your hand up.
Oh, I just.
That's
Look at
good.
my pen.
Look, we were at an auction.
Sold.
We'll move on to 9.2, the first reading of the discipline policy 515.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, first reading, so no action required on this tonight. While there's only one change in the policy, and that is a reference on page 4, really just referencing from policy 425 to 510, just a policy reference change. As Member Luther indicated in her policy committee update, this does get a really deep look by our administrators, and they spend a lot of time on this. And in addition to reviewing each component, looking at this from an equity lens as well. While there aren't other changes, it doesn't mean that we're not taking a close look at these policies every step of the way. So this is approved annually, and I'll be asking for that approval at the next
Thank you, Dr. Massey. We'll move to 9.3, the first reading of the Instructional Materials Films Policy 610, prior policy 539.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we'll be asking for approval at the next meeting, first reading here tonight. Oftentimes, when we look for this policy, we look in the instructional policies area, the 610 category, and we don't find it there because it's lodged in the 500s category. So it just makes sense that we move it to the 600 category because it makes more sense there. And that's the only change we're recommending on this policy, is the number on the policy.
There's, isn't a model policy for films.
It is model policy.
This is a model policy?
Yep, MSBA. Yep.
Perfect.
One thing we talked about in policy too was that we weren't actually looking through this policy, we were merely moving it to a different location. Yeah.
I didn't see on here where it said that, but maybe it'll be there next time. That it's a model policy.
And I'll verify that, but I'm sure this is drawn from model policy with MSBA.
Yeah, and I just appreciate all the work that Donna and her crew and the policy committee does. I mean, our policies are getting cleaned up and looking really good.
Agreed. Especially some of them older ones. All right, with that, the next item is to review the upcoming calendar dates, and we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.